New York was not born as a city of dreams. Before the skyscrapers, before Wall Street and Broadway, it was a city shaped by hunger, fear, and violence. And at the center of that chaos stood one place that came to symbolize everything dark and dangerous about early New York. Its name was 5 Points. 5 Points was a real location in Lower Manhattan, named after a strange intersection of 5 streets. In the early 19th century, this area became the most notorious neighborhood in the city and possibly in all of America. Newspapers described it as lawless. Visitors described it as hell on earth. By the 1840s, New York was overwhelmed by immigration. Ships arrived daily, bringing thousands of people fleeing famine, poverty, and political collapse. Most of them were Irish, escaping the Great Famine. They arrived with nothing, and 5 Points was often the only place they could afford. What they found there was misery. Entire families lived in single rooms. Old buildings collapsed into damp basements filled with sewage. Clean water was rare. Disease was constant. Alcohol was everywhere. In this world, survival mattered more than morality, and violence became a language everyone understood. This is where gangs emerged. The gangs of 5 Points were not random criminals. They were organized groups with names, leaders, and reputations. They defended territory, controlled businesses, and enforced their own rules. If you lived in 5 Points, a gang decided whether you were protected or prey. One of the most famous gangs was the Dead Rabbits, largely made up of Irish immigrants. They clashed with groups like the Bowery Boys, native-born Protestants who believed immigrants were destroying their city. These conflicts were not only criminal, they were ethnic, religious, and political. The streets became war zones. Fights erupted in daylight, men charged with clubs, knives, and pistols, windows shattered, buildings burned. Police were often powerless or corrupt. In 1857, tensions exploded into full-scale riots. Gangs took over entire neighborhoods. Barricades were built in the streets. The violence grew so severe that the city called in military forces to restore order. But the most unsettling truth was this: the gangs were not enemies of the system. They were part of it. Political parties used gangs as weapons. They paid them to intimidate voters, disrupt elections, and silence rivals. If you wanted power in New York, you needed the streets, and the streets belonged to the gangs. 5 Points became the training ground for organized crime. Here, violence was structured, loyalty was rewarded, territory meant power. Long before the Mafia, long before Prohibition, the blueprint was already written. In 1927, journalist Herbert Asbury collected these stories in his book, Gangs of New York. The book mixed hard facts with legends, but it preserved a truth history tried to forget: that New York was forged through bloodshed. Decades later, director Martin Scorsese brought this world back to life on screen. His film, Gangs of New York, is not perfectly accurate, but it captures the spirit of the era. A city fighting to define itself. The character of Bill the Butcher represents many real men who ruled the streets of 5 Points. They did not see themselves as criminals. They saw themselves as guardians of tradition, defending their territory from change. Over time, 5 Points vanished. The slums were demolished. Streets were redesigned. Government buildings replaced the ruins. But the violence did not disappear. It evolved. Modern New York stands on the foundations of those battles. Beneath the pavement lies the memory of a city born from conflict. 5 Points was not just a neighborhood. It was the moment New York became New York.